My grandson looked me in the eye and said, "It's not for you, Grandpa. You don't even pay for it." He meant the Wi-Fi. But it felt like he meant everything: the food, the warmth, the right to belong. I built this house with my bare hands. I raised his father here. Buried my wife in that soil out back. And now, I needed permission to connect to the internet, in my own home. That moment didn't just sting. It cracked something open in me. Something quiet, deep, and irreversible. That night, I started reading about property laws. There was a time when this house echoed with laughter. Not the kind of laughter that stings like it does now, real, full-hearted joy. I remember the first time I saw it. Just a dusty patch of land at the edge of town. Marjorie stood beside me, her hand in mine, and said, "I can already hear the kids running through the halls." She always saw what I couldn't yet. I worked double shifts at the mill to afford that land. Nights, weekends, didn't matter. My hands were calloused, my back ached, but every nail I drove into those beams felt like progress. A home. We didn't have much, but we had pride. That house became our whole world. I remember painting the nursery for Adam, our only son, with a second-hand brush and cheap sky blue paint. Marjorie played music on the old radio while I worked, humming along as she folded tiny socks and diapers. Adam was a bright kid, curious, always asking questions. He'd follow me around in the yard, pretending to help with the mower or the hose. He used to say, "One day, I'll be as strong as you, Dad." That memory still gets to me. There was so much trust in his eyes back then. We raised him with love, but not without rules. I was strict, I won't lie. Respect was non-negotiable in our house. Please and thank you, eat what's on your plate, apologize when you're wrong. Marjorie softened me, always reminding me to explain the why behind my lessons. She had a gentleness I never quite mastered. Even when money was tight, we found happiness. Friday nights meant board games, popcorn, and those silly comedy shows Marjorie loved. Adam would fall asleep on the couch with his head in her lap while I read the paper. Those were the years I felt most like a man, not because I was tough, but because I was useful. I was needed. When Adam got older and went to college, we were proud. He was the first in our family to earn a degree. I remember standing outside the auditorium, my tie too tight and my shoes polished for once, just beaming. Marjorie cried the whole drive home. She always said, "We did good, didn't we?" And I'd nod. Because we did. He met Kim a few years later. She was polite at first, a little too polished, maybe, but Marjorie liked her. Said she brought out Adam's ambition. I suppose she did. They married in a small ceremony we helped pay for. I walked Marjorie down the aisle that day, just to see her smile under that summer sun. Then came Eli, our grandson. I can't even describe the joy that boy brought into our lives. I used to rock him to sleep on the front porch, humming the same tune Marjorie used to sing to Adam. He had Adam's eyes and her dimpled smile. For a while, I felt like I was living the good years all over again, only slower, gentler. After Marjorie passed, lung cancer, out of nowhere, the house fell silent. That silence was unbearable. I would still set a second mug of coffee every morning out of habit. I'd forget, and then I'd remember, and then I'd sit in that silence for too long. Adam offered to move in, just for a few months, to help me cope. I didn't hesitate. I told him the house was his as much as mine. I thought having them here would bring life back into the rooms. And at first, it did. Kim cooked, Eli played with the dog, and Adam helped repaint the fence. We were a family again, not quite the same, but close. But slowly, something began to shift. Kim started making changes, small at first. A new couch without asking. Rearranged the pantry. I didn't mind. I thought, this is what families do. They live, they adjust. But I started noticing other things. My recliner moved to the garage. My old radio, Marjorie's radio, vanished. Still, I kept quiet. I thought maybe I was being too sensitive. Maybe grief made me see things differently. Then came the Wi-Fi. They installed it without telling me. I was still using dial-up, you see. I asked for the password, and Kim laughed like I'd asked for their banking info. "You don't need it," she said. "You don't even know how to use it." Adam didn't say anything. Just kept scrolling on his phone. I told myself it was a misunderstanding. Maybe she didn't mean it like that. I tried again a week later. Eli was playing a game online, and I wanted to send an email to an old army buddy. That's when Eli said it. "It's not for you, Grandpa. You don't even pay for it." 7 words. But they hit like a brick wall. I walked back to my room, sat down on the edge of the bed, and stared at the spot where Marjorie used to keep her sewing basket. My throat was tight. Not from anger, from sorrow. I'd never asked for rent. Never asked for a thing. And yet, here I was, an old man asking permission to access a signal that ran through walls I built. That was the night I stopped being quiet. After that night, I started paying more attention. Not in an angry, suspicious way, just quiet observation. The kind you do when your gut is trying to tell you something your heart doesn't want to hear. It began with the little things. My coffee mug disappeared one morning. The chipped ceramic one Marjorie gave me for our 20th anniversary, it had a small drawing of our house and the words, "Home is who you share it with." I checked every cabinet, even the garage. It was just gone. When I asked Kim about it, she shrugged and said, "Maybe it broke." We needed to make space. Make space. Then came the thermostat. Kim began adjusting it to her liking, always turning it down because heat is expensive. Never mind that I was the one paying the utilities, my pension, my savings. One night I was so cold I slept in my old army jacket. I didn't say a word. I just stared at the ceiling and listened to the silence that used to be filled with Marjorie's soft snoring. Adam started working longer hours, or so he said. He stopped joining me for Sunday breakfast, a tradition we'd kept since he was a teen. I'd still fry the bacon and toast the bread, just in case. But his chair stayed empty. No explanation, just absence. The real shift came in how they spoke to me, or rather, how they didn't. Conversations became instructions. "Don't leave the dishes in the sink, Dad. Don't let the dog on the couch. We need you to stay in your room when Eli has friends over." Not requests. Commands. I'd always tried to be respectful. It was their home now too, or at least that's what I told myself. But more and more, I felt like a tenant. No, not even that. Tenants have rights. I felt like a guest with a time limit. One evening, I walked into the living room while Eli was watching TV. Just wanted to sit for a few minutes, maybe catch the news. He looked at me, annoyed, and said, "Can't you do this in your room?" I stood there, not sure what to say. I'd spent over 30 years in that room, building it, repairing it, filling it with memories. Now I was being told to leave it. Adam was in the kitchen. He heard it. Didn't say a word. That silence hurt more than the comment. When you raise a child, you carry their weight in your arms, on your shoulders, in your worries. You patch their scraped knees, teach them to ride a bike, stay up all night when they have a fever. And you do it not for praise, but because it's your duty. Your joy, even. But there comes a day, you never know when you realize that child no longer sees you as the giant who protected them. They see you as an inconvenience. One night, I overheard Kim on the phone in the hallway. She didn't know I was in the study. "It's just hard," she said, "living with someone who doesn't contribute. He just sits there. Like furniture. Furniture. I sat there long after she walked away, listening to the quiet hum of the house. My house. A few days later, I noticed they started locking the office door. The one I used to keep family photos, legal papers, Marjorie's recipe box. I asked Adam about it. He said, "There's just some stuff we're sorting through. Don't worry about it." No explanation, no invitation to be part of it. I started writing things down. Not because I planned to use it, not yet, but because I needed to remind myself I wasn't losing my mind. Dates, comments, what I heard and when. I kept the notes inside an old crossword puzzle book. No one ever bothered to look there. There were still moments with Eli that gave me hope. Sometimes, I'd catch him watching me while I trimmed the rose bushes Marjorie planted. He wouldn't say much, but I could tell he remembered. One afternoon, I showed him how to deadhead the wilted blooms. He nodded, quiet, respectful. That's the thing about children, they're always watching. Even when they pretend not to care. But then, a week later, I found my gardening gloves tossed in the trash. Kim said they were filthy and old. Just like that. No apology. No asking. That was the first time I raised my voice in months. "Those were your mother-in-law's gloves," I said, sharper than I meant to. Kim scoffed. "They were falling apart. We're not living in a museum, Frank." Frank. Not Dad. Not even Mr. Just. Frank. Adam came in and asked what was going on. Kim rolled her eyes and said, "He's upset about garbage." I looked at Adam. I waited. And again, he said nothing. Just turned back into the hallway like I wasn't even there. That night, I sat in the dark on the back porch, listening to the crickets. I used to love that sound. But now it felt like the house was whispering something else, like the walls were starting to lean away from me. I thought about Marjorie. How she used to defend me when Adam got snappy as a teenager. How she'd sit him down and say, "Your father isn't perfect, but he's the reason you have a roof over your head." Now, the roof felt like a burden to them. Something they had to put up with until I was no longer in the way. Something in my chest ached. But it wasn't just sadness. It was the beginning of something firmer. Resolve. It happened on a Sunday. That was always our day, ever since Adam was a boy. Sunday meant breakfast together, maybe church, then watching a ball game or working in the yard. It was the one day of the week when the pace slowed, when family was supposed to feel like family. That morning, I came into the kitchen a little later than usual. I'd been up early repotting one of Marjorie's succulents. She used to keep it by the window, I still did. When I walked in, I heard laughter, Kim's high-pitched voice, Adam's chuckle, Eli's deeper tone now that he was growing up. The scent of pancakes filled the air. I smiled, thinking maybe, just maybe, things were turning around. But there were only 3 plates on the table. I stood there for a moment, in the doorway, waiting. Waiting for someone to notice. Waiting for an extra plate to be pulled down from the cabinet. Waiting for a, "Hey, Dad, sit down. We saved you a seat." Nothing. Eli glanced at me and then away, like I was a stranger who'd wandered into the wrong house. Kim leaned over the table, pouring syrup without missing a beat. Adam looked up briefly, said, "Morning," and went back to his phone. No one offered a seat. No one said a word about breakfast. I cleared my throat and walked to the fridge, pretending I hadn't noticed. Opened it. Closed it. Still nothing. The silence felt thick, like wet wool pressing down on my shoulders. I turned and asked, "Should I just eat later?" Kim didn't even look up. "We thought you were still asleep," she said flatly. I wasn't. I never was. They knew that. "I can make something," I offered, hoping, just hoping, for some kind of invitation to stay. Kim gave a tight smile. Actually, we're having a little family breakfast. Just us three. It's been a stressful week. I felt my heart slow. Just us three. Adam looked up again, met my eyes. He didn't say anything. Not, come sit. Not, don't be silly. Not even, sorry. He just kept chewing. I stood there for a moment, unsure what to do with my hands. My legs. My face. I gave a small nod and turned toward the hallway. As I left, I heard Eli whisper something I couldn't quite catch, and then, laughter. Laughter. It wasn't even cruel laughter. That might have been easier to understand. It was casual. Comfortable. Like I wasn't even a variable in the room. Like I didn't exist. Back in my room, I sat down on the edge of the bed, just like I'd done after the Wi-Fi comment. The bed creaked under my weight. I stared at my hands, old, wrinkled, veined. The same hands that once carried Adam through a flood when he was 5. The same hands that held Marjorie's as she took her last breath. I wanted to believe this was a misunderstanding. That maybe they were just distracted. But I wasn't a fool. I'd seen this before, not here, not in my house, but in the world. I'd seen what it looked like when someone was quietly pushed out. Erased without being told directly. You don't always get kicked out with a suitcase. Sometimes they just stop setting the table for you. Later that afternoon, I came out of my room to get a glass of water. Kim and Adam were in the living room, rearranging the shelves. We could move these photos into storage, Kim was saying, holding a picture of Marjorie and me on our 40th anniversary. Adam nodded. Yeah, makes sense. Eli needs space for his books. I stepped into the room, gently took the photo from her hands. Leave those, I said. Calmly. Firmly. She gave me a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Of course, Frank. We just thought. I said leave them. Adam didn't intervene. Again. He just turned to the bookshelf and started fiddling with something else. I took the photo back to my room and placed it beside the succulent. My hands trembled slightly, but not from anger. From loss. They didn't need to yell. They didn't need to push. They were making it clear in every other way, this house wasn't mine anymore. That evening, I went outside for a walk, something I hadn't done much of lately. I needed air. Space. A place to think where the walls weren't listening. On my way back, I passed Mrs. Delgado, our neighbor of nearly 30 years. She was watering her roses. She looked up, gave me a sympathetic smile. You all right, Frank? She asked. I hesitated, then nodded. Just stretching my legs. She paused, looked at me the way people do when they know more than they're saying. Then she added gently, you still live there, don't you? I stopped. What do you mean? She hesitated again. It's just, the other day, Kim was talking to someone out front. A realtor, maybe. Said something about getting this place listed before the end of the year. I didn't want to assume, but... The world tilted slightly. Thanks, Margaret, I said, forcing a smile. I appreciate it. I walked the rest of the way home slowly, like my shoes weighed more than they should. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the living room while they slept, looked at the walls, the photos, the furniture we'd picked out in our 30s. The memories we made in every corner. And I realized something. They weren't just pushing me out emotionally. They were planning something bigger. And they were hoping I wouldn't notice. A few days after Mrs. Delgado mentioned the realtor, I started paying closer attention, not just to words, but to whispers, movements, the way doors opened and closed when they thought I wasn't nearby. There's a quiet kind of betrayal that doesn't shout. It tiptoes. It avoids eye contact. And I could feel it thick in the air. They were planning something. I could sense it in the way Kim avoided long conversations with me now, how Adam started locking the office door more regularly. Even Eli had gone quieter around me, not rude, just distant. Like someone who knew a secret and didn't know how to carry the weight of it. The final nudge came one Thursday afternoon. They thought I'd gone for my usual walk, which I had, but I'd returned early. I left my shoes off so they wouldn't hear me coming. I didn't mean to spy. I just stepped inside quietly and headed toward the hallway when I heard them in the office. Kim's voice was hushed, urgent. We can't wait too long. The market's good now, and if we wait, interest rates might go up. We need him to sign while he's still. Still what? There was a pause, and then Adam mumbled, he's stubborn, Kim. I know my dad. If he finds out, he'll shut everything down. We don't need him to find out, she said. We just need him to trust you. You're his son. Trust. That word burned deeper than the rest. I backed away before I could hear more. My legs moved on instinct, but my chest felt tight. I closed the door to my room and sat down slowly, like my body was made of stone. It wasn't just forgetfulness anymore. Not just exclusion or disrespect. They were scheming. And they were using my own kindness, my own silence, as a tool against me. That night, I went into the garage and pulled out an old locked box I hadn't touched in years. Inside were documents, the deed to the house, Marjorie's will, power of attorney papers she'd signed when she got sick. I held the deed in my hands and ran my fingers across the edges like it was a relic. Because it was. That piece of paper was the last real proof I had that this home, this life, belonged to me. The next day, I waited until they'd all gone out. Adam to work, Kim to wherever she always disappeared during the afternoons, Eli to his friend's house. Then I crept into the office. I'd never done anything like that before. Not in my life. But desperation has a way of unlocking doors you swore you'd never touch. Inside the desk drawer, the one they thought I couldn't access, was a file labeled Property Transition. Inside were forms. Drafted papers. A transfer of ownership request already filled out with Adam's name. Notes about a refinancing plan. I skimmed through them, my hands trembling. It wasn't just hypothetical. They had timelines. Appointments. They were going to take the house. They'd already begun. I found a sticky note with a password scribbled on it, probably for Adam's laptop. I didn't touch the computer, not yet. But I took a photo of every document with my phone. I emailed them to myself, then printed out copies at the library the next morning. The librarian, a young man named Jerome, looked surprised when I asked to print over 30 pages. Family project, I told him with a forced smile. He nodded. Let me know if you need help. That night, back home, I laid all the pages on my bed and stared at them until my eyes hurt. And then, I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I talked to Marjorie. I sat in my chair by the window, held her photo in my lap, and whispered, "They're trying to erase us, Marge." Just like that. I waited for an answer I knew wouldn't come. But the silence felt warmer somehow. Like she was still with me, in her own quiet way. And then the memories started rolling in, not of the betrayal, but of the good. Of the time she patched my coat before a job interview. Of the way she looked at Adam when he learned to ride a bike. Of how proud she was when we paid off the mortgage. She always said, "This house will take care of us one day, Frank. It'll keep us safe." Now I was the one trying to keep it safe. The next morning, I did something unexpected. I made breakfast, real breakfast. Eggs, toast, bacon, fresh coffee. The smell filled the house. They all trickled in, surprised. Kim even smiled and said, "What's the occasion?" "No occasion," I said. Just felt like cooking. Adam sat across from me, cautiously. "You okay, Dad?" I smiled. "Never better." I watched them eat. Observed every forkful, every glance they exchanged. I was done being passive. They thought I was old. They thought I was harmless. They thought I wouldn't notice. But I had. And now, I was watching them through different eyes, not as a father eager to please, but as a man preparing for war. The kind of war you win not with weapons, but with wisdom. I started making calls that afternoon. Quietly. Carefully. A lawyer Marjorie and I had used years ago, still in town, still friendly. He remembered me. Invited me to come by next week. "Bring everything," he said. "We'll take care of it." I hung up and felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Steady. They had changed the Wi-Fi password. They thought that was power. But I had something better, a memory. A promise. And paperwork with my name still on it. They had plans. But now, so did I. Have you ever felt betrayed by your own family? Let us know in the comments. I waited until the following Monday morning. Not because I wanted to delay the confrontation, but because I needed time to be absolutely sure. Once you cross certain lines with your own blood, you can't walk back. They'd already crossed theirs. The night before, I sat on the porch with a cup of tea and thought about what I was about to do. Not just legally, but emotionally. There's a weight that comes with severing ties, even when they're tangled in betrayal. I wasn't angry anymore, not in the shouting, fist-on-table kind of way. I was hollow. And that hollow had started to feel heavier than rage. Monday morning, I walked into the kitchen while Adam was reading the paper, something he rarely did anymore unless he wanted to look like a good son when neighbors visited. I sat down across from him and said, "I found the papers in your office." He looked up slowly, blinked, and played dumb. "What papers?" "The ones titled Property Transition. With your name on the deed. And refinancing plans." His face froze. A flicker of panic, quickly buried under a smirk. "Dad, you weren't supposed to." "To what?" "Know what's happening in my own house." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't have to. The quiet did all the work. He shifted in his chair. "We were going to talk to you about it. Eventually." "When?" "After I signed without reading? Or after you packed my room?" Kim walked in halfway through and caught the last part. "Frank, you don't understand, this is for the best. You're not managing things like you used to. It's a lot of responsibility." I looked at her dead on. "I managed just fine before you moved in. The house ran on time. The bills were paid. The pantry was stocked. And no one had to beg for the internet." She laughed. Actually laughed. "You're still upset about the Wi-Fi?" "No," I said, steady as stone. "That was just the first red flag." Adam sighed like he was the victim. "We thought you'd want to downsize. Maybe somewhere quieter. With help. It's not personal, Dad. Not personal. That's what people say right before they push you off the edge." I didn't argue. I just stood, nodded once, and said, "Thank you." That's all I needed to hear. I left them sitting there, still thinking I was just being sensitive. Still underestimating me. Later that day, I met with our old lawyer, Mr. Keller. He'd aged, like all of us, but his mind was still sharp. "I knew Marjorie for years," he said, flipping through the documents I'd brought. "She wouldn't want this done behind your back." I nodded. "She wouldn't recognize what this house has become." We spent 2 hours drafting the changes. It wasn't easy. Nothing about undoing trust is. But piece by piece, I rebuilt control. We started by updating the deed, moving the house into a living trust under my full ownership. Then we rewrote my will from scratch. Adam and Kim were removed. A clause was added: if the will was contested by any family member, the house and all assets would go directly to a local veterans charity. It's the cleanest way to avoid manipulation, Keller said. And very hard to fight in court. I asked to leave a small educational bond for Eli. Not out of sentiment, but out of hope. Maybe the boy could still be reached. Maybe one day he'd look back and ask himself what really happened. As I signed the final page, Keller asked, "You sure about all this?" I looked out the window at the courthouse flag waving in the breeze. Then I nodded. Dead sure. I left his office lighter, not in spirit, but in burden. Like I'd been carrying a full pail up a mountain and finally set it down. I still had to face them. But at least now, I had something they didn't expect: leverage. Back home, the air felt different. I walked into the kitchen to find Kim tossing out groceries I'd bought. Said she didn't recognize the brand. "They taste weird," she muttered. I picked up the can from the trash. Same brand we'd used since Marjorie clipped coupons. "These fed our family for 30 years, I said softly. She didn't respond. Just tossed another into the bin. Later that evening, Mr. Hernandez from next door stopped by. He brought me some tools I'd lent him years ago and lingered a bit longer than usual. "You doing all right, Frank?" he asked, his eyes searching mine. "I will be," I said. "Just a few things I have to put in place." He didn't press. But before he left, he patted my shoulder and said, "You built this house. Don't let them take it from you." That night, I couldn't sleep. I walked the halls quietly, touching the frames, the walls, the places where laughter once lived. I opened a drawer and found a picture of young Adam sitting on my lap, holding a toy hammer. His cheeks were chubby, his eyes wide with joy. Where did that boy go? I didn't cry. Not yet. But I stared at that photo for a long time and whispered, "I didn't raise you for this." The next morning, I woke up early. Showered. Shaved. Put on my suit, the one I wore to Marjorie's funeral. I looked at myself in the mirror and saw a man who had given everything, and who was finally, quietly, ready to take something back. It was time. I never imagined I'd be sitting in a lawyer's office rewriting my will just to protect myself from my own son. But that's exactly where I was, same office where Marjorie and I once signed our wills together, back when trust came naturally and the future felt like a shared dream, not a battlefield. Mr. Keller, bless him, walked me through every clause with patience. He never once looked at me with pity, just respect. That meant more than I can say. "We can keep it simple," he said. "House and assets go into the trust. You're the trustee. Upon your passing, you name a successor, someone you trust." I shook my head. No one left I trust like that. Not in blood, anyway. He tapped his pen, thinking. "Then we list a contingent plan. You pass, and if no successor is named, it goes straight to the veterans' shelter in town. Can't be challenged unless someone wants to spend years in court, and even then, unlikely they'll win." I nodded. Perfect. We drafted a letter, too, one to be read after my death, explaining my decision. Not out of spite. Not to shame Adam or Kim. Just the truth. The whole truth. I wanted them to know why. If they ever wondered. If they ever cared. There was a moment, right before I signed the final version, where my hand hesitated. Not from doubt, from sorrow. I had imagined, once, that this house would go to Adam. That he'd raise Eli here. That one day, he'd sit on the same porch and tell his son stories about the man who built it. But that man, me, had become an inconvenience to him. I couldn't give this home to someone who only wanted it once I was gone. So I signed. With each stroke of the pen, I felt both pain and power. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I needed peace. When it was done, Mr. Keller leaned back and said, "I know this wasn't easy." "No," I said. "But it's right." He filed the documents, gave me certified copies, and offered to notarize a letter of notice in case I ever needed to show proof to Adam or Kim. I tucked everything into a folder and held it like it was the most valuable thing I'd ever owned, because, in many ways, it was. Back home, the house was quiet. Eli was at school, Kim was out running errands, and Adam had taken the day off, or so he told me. He was sitting in the living room when I walked in, flipping through channels. "You're dressed up," he said, eyeing my suit. "Had some errands?" He didn't press. Maybe he didn't care. Or maybe he suspected. I sat across from him. Held the folder on my lap like a shield. "You remember when I put you through college?" I asked suddenly. He turned. Confused. "Of course. And how we took out a second mortgage to do it." Marjorie was scared, but she said, "He's worth it. He'll take care of us when we're older." Adam's expression shifted. Not guilt. Discomfort. "I remember," he said cautiously. "I believe that too," I said, softer now. "Until this past year." He looked away. "Dad, we were just trying to make things easier." "For who?" I interrupted, voice steady. "For me? Or for yourselves?" He didn't answer. I stood, folder still in hand. This house was built on sweat, love, and sacrifice. You don't get to erase that with paperwork and polite theft. I left him there in silence. Later that evening, Eli came into my room, fidgeting with his sleeves. "Grandpa?" he asked. "Yes?" "Mom said we might move soon." I looked up from my book. "Did she?" "Yeah. She said the house might be too big for us now. That it's time." I smiled gently. Some things feel big when your heart gets small. He frowned, not quite understanding. Then he said, "I like it here. I don't want to move." I nodded. Neither did I. He hesitated, then asked, "Are you mad at Dad?" I thought about it. Really thought. "No. I'm disappointed." That's heavier. He stood there a little longer before quietly saying, "I miss when we used to do puzzles together." "So do I." He left, and I sat in the fading light, thinking about how family doesn't vanish all at once. It fades. Dims. Loses its shape like smoke. And before you know it, you're standing in the ruins of something you thought was indestructible. But I wasn't ruined. Not yet. Because for the first time in a long while, I had a plan. A boundary. A voice again. And I would not be ignored. It was a Saturday. The kind that starts quiet, just birdsong through the window, the faint sound of traffic on the far road, the creak of old wood shifting under morning sun. Peaceful. Fragile. That morning, I made myself oatmeal, sat at the kitchen table, and watched the steam rise from my cup. It was one of those slow moments I used to savor. But it didn't last. Kim came in wearing sunglasses and heels, clearly dressed for something. Adam followed behind, buttoning his shirt. Eli trailed after, phone in hand, barely looking up. "We're heading to the meeting," Kim said. "Meeting?" I asked. Adam sighed, as if I'd asked a silly question. "With the realtor. We told you last week." No. They hadn't. Kim leaned on the counter. "We're finalizing the staging plan for the house. Pictures, listings, walkthroughs, all of it. We'll need you out of the way for a while when they come in." The words hit like cold water. "Out of the way," I repeated. "In my house." Kim rolled her eyes. "Frank, we've gone over this. It's time to move on. You'll be better off somewhere with assistance. A facility. A facility? I almost laughed. You mean a nursing home? Adam raised his hands. It's not a bad thing, Dad. You'll have help. Meals. Activities. You don't have to worry about bills anymore. I'm not worried about bills, I said flatly. I'm worried about vultures picking apart a life they didn't build. Kim's voice turned cold. We're just trying to help you transition. I stood up slowly, my knees stiff but my spine straight. Into what? Silence? Dispossession? You didn't even tell me about this meeting. Adam looked at the floor. Kim didn't flinch. You've already decided, I said. Adam shrugged. We thought it'd be easier this way. That was it. No apology. No conversation. Just decisions made behind closed doors. Later that afternoon, while they were gone, I walked into the living room and looked around. The coffee table was new. So were the curtains. But the bones of the house were mine, the baseboards I installed, the window trim I sanded smooth, the floorboards I stained by hand after work in the evenings. Marjorie had picked the stain color. She always liked darker wood. I opened the closet and pulled out a box I'd prepared the night before, neatly labeled with a Sharpie, documents. Originals. Do not touch. Inside were the copies of the trust papers, the new will, the certified deed. I placed it near the front door, just in case. Then I went into the garage and took out a small tool kit. Nothing dramatic. Just what I'd need if they tried to bar me from my own drawers or files again. By the time they came home, cheerful, upbeat, talking about square footage and natural light, I was sitting in the den with a manila envelope in my lap and a folder resting on the coffee table. Kim paused when she saw it. What's this? I looked up. That's reality. Adam frowned. Dad. You wanted to sell this house without telling me, I said. You planned to move me into a home. You locked away documents that didn't belong to you. That ends today. Kim stepped forward. You can't stop the sale. I smiled, calm. You're right. I can't stop your sale. But I can stop you from selling something you don't own. Adam paled. What? I opened the folder slowly, like a dealer revealing a winning hand. The house is no longer in my name. It belongs to a living trust, of which I'm the sole trustee. You're not named. You're not entitled. And if you attempt to contest it. I held up the second envelope. Everything goes to a veterans' charity. Every penny. Adam's mouth opened, then closed. He looked stunned. Kim reached for the papers. You can't just. Try me, I said quietly. Eli appeared behind them, looking back and forth. What's going on? Kim turned to him. Nothing, sweetheart. Grandpa's just confused. I stood. No, Eli. I'm not confused. I just finally understand. They didn't yell. They didn't argue. They stared. And I watched as their expressions shifted, not from anger, but from recognition. Recognition that the man they thought was fading had been wide awake all along. I'd like you to leave, I said. You have 30 days. Adam stared at me. You're evicting your own son. No, I said. I'm reclaiming my home. They left the room slowly, like people leaving a funeral, unsure whether they should say something or just keep walking. When they were gone, I sat back down, my hands trembling slightly. Not from fear. From release. It was done. The moment I'd been walking toward for months had finally arrived. There were no fireworks. No applause. Just a quiet house, sunlight on the floor, and the faint scent of lavender from Marjorie's old potpourri jar on the shelf. I closed my eyes and whispered, "We're still here, Marge. Still standing. Still ours." They didn't move out quietly. For days, the house was a storm of slammed doors, whispered phone calls, and icy silence. Kim stopped speaking to me altogether, except for muttered curses under her breath. Adam avoided eye contact. Eli just watched. I couldn't read him anymore. But I stayed calm. I watered Marjorie's succulents. Took my tea on the porch. Kept my folder close, like armor. I'd already reclaimed the house, legally, emotionally, spiritually. But I knew there was one more step. One last moment they wouldn't see coming. A week later, they hosted a dinner at a local restaurant, not just for Eli's birthday, but to say farewell to friends before the big move. I wasn't invited. They didn't even mention it. But I knew. I overheard Adam confirming the reservation on the phone. Private room. 12 guests. Some of our oldest neighbors. Family friends who thought Adam was the golden son. It felt like the final insult. So I showed up. I didn't dress up, just wore my usual, ironed shirt, old blazer, clean shoes. I brought no entourage, no anger, just the truth, and my folder. When I arrived, the waitress looked unsure. "Are you with the party in the back?" I nodded. Family. I walked in as Adam was mid-sentence, standing at the head of the table. Everyone was laughing, wine glasses raised. Eli looked surprised to see me. Kim stiffened. Adam froze. "Dad," he said. "This is kind of a private." "It's about to be public," I replied, placing the folder on the center of the table. I kept my voice even, loud enough for the room but calm. "I know most of you here," I said, glancing around. "Some of you I helped move into your homes. Some of you borrowed my tools. I even helped raise a few of your children." The room quieted. "I want to tell you all something important. These two here," I gestured to Adam and Kim, "were planning to sell my house. The one I built with my late wife, Marjorie. Without telling me. Without my consent." Gasps. Shuffling. Kim's mouth twitched, but she stayed silent. Adam looked like he wanted the floor to swallow him whole. "They thought I wouldn't notice," I continued. "They had forms drawn up, meetings with realtors, and even tried to move me into a care home." A woman near the end of the table, Mrs. Taylor, from 3 doors down, put a hand over her mouth. "You can't be serious." I opened the folder slowly and held up the deed. But they didn't know I went to a lawyer. The house is in a trust now. I am the only trustee. If they contest the will, everything goes to charity. The silence was so deep, I could hear the air conditioning hum. I looked at Kim. "You said I was like furniture. That I just sat there." She flinched. "And you," I turned to Adam. "You used to sit on my shoulders. You used to cry when I left for work. What happened to that boy?" His mouth opened, but nothing came out. I stepped back. "This house will not be taken. Not while I'm breathing. Not by people who think inheritance is owed instead of earned." I closed the folder and tucked it under my arm. Then I turned to Eli. "You're still young. You don't have to become like them. You can still choose respect." He looked down, cheeks flushed. Without waiting for a response, I nodded to the rest of the table. "Thank you for listening." I walked out, past the stunned diners, past the staff whispering behind the counter, out into the cool night air. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt free. Back home, the porch light was still on. The house was quiet. Peaceful. I sat down in Marjorie's rocking chair and looked up at the stars. Some battles don't end with applause. They end with silence, the kind that tells you, finally, you're heard. Do you think the father made the right choice? Comment and don't forget to like and subscribe for more true life stories. The silence after that dinner wasn't the kind that hurts. It was the kind that heals. For the first time in months, maybe years, I didn't feel like I was tiptoeing through my own life. The house was quiet, yes, but it was a different kind of quiet. Not the icy silence that Kim used like a weapon, or the dismissive silence Adam used to avoid confrontation. This was a stillness that felt clean. Honest. Mine. They moved out 5 days after the restaurant incident. No fanfare. No goodbyes. I didn't ask where they were going. They didn't say. Adam left a box of tools on the porch, mine, I suppose, though most were ones I'd lent him years ago. Kim didn't speak a word. Eli looked at me from the back seat of their car, hesitated like he might get out, and then didn't. Just like that, the door closed. The car pulled away. And the house, our house, exhaled. I walked back inside, alone, and sat in the center of the living room. No TV on. No voices in the kitchen. Just me and the creak of the wood under my chair. I looked at the walls, the ceiling, the old beams I'd placed with Marjorie's help. They felt more alive than the people who'd just left. For the first few days, I didn't know what to do with the space. It was like the walls had expanded, and I didn't quite know how to fill them. I found myself talking out loud sometimes, narrating my day like Marjorie was still listening. Got the mail, junk again, grocery ad says milk's on sale. Or, I moved your succulent to the sunniest spot, Marge. You were right. It perked up. It wasn't loneliness. Not really. It was remembering what it felt like to be in conversation with someone who actually listened. I started walking more. Down to the corner store. Around the block. Past the school where Adam used to play soccer. People recognized me more now, not just as Frank, but as that Frank. The one who stood up to his own family. There was gossip, sure. But also respect. Mrs. Delgado brought me a pie one afternoon. Just because, she said, though I suspect it was her way of saying she'd heard. You all right, Frank? She asked as she handed me the dish. I'm better than I've been in a long while, I said truthfully. I spent my evenings on the porch again. Watching the sun sink behind the houses. Listening to the soft rustle of wind through the trees. The air didn't feel so heavy anymore. One morning, I found a small envelope under the door. No name on it. Inside was a note, scribbled in handwriting I recognized too well. I'm sorry. I didn't know how to stop her. I didn't know how to speak up. I should have. I hope you're okay. Eli. I sat with that letter in my hands for a long time. Part of me ached. The other part, the steadier part, felt proud. He hadn't defended me in the moment, but maybe the guilt meant there was still a piece of heart in him that I hadn't lost. That evening, I put the letter in a box with Marjorie's scarf and a few photos. I didn't write back. Not yet. But I didn't throw it away either. Weeks passed. I started fixing things, not because they were broken, but because the house felt like it deserved care again. I oiled the front gate. Repainted the shed. Even replaced the screen door that had squeaked for 3 years. The work was slow, but purposeful. My body ached more these days, but the ache felt earned. One morning, while trimming the rose bush Marjorie planted by the fence, I heard someone call out. Still got the green thumb, huh? I turned to see Mr. Hernandez, leaning on the fence, coffee thermos in hand. Trying, I said with a small smile. He nodded toward the house. Looks different already. Feels lighter. It is, I said. For the first time in a while, it's home again. He stayed for a while, talking about nothing and everything. His wife had passed 2 years earlier. He knew about empty halls and echoing rooms. But he also knew about healing. We talked about age, and grief, and the quiet dignity of standing your ground. That evening, I sat on the porch again, same chair, same breeze, same shadows stretching across the lawn. I closed my eyes and whispered, "You'd like it now, Marge. It's just us again." And for the first time in a long while, I believed it. It was the middle of a quiet afternoon when I got the idea. I was sitting in the sunroom, sorting through an old box of Marjorie's belongings, scarves, faded recipe cards, church bulletins from 20 years ago. Underneath it all was a notebook, one I didn't recognize. Inside, in her soft, looping handwriting, was a list. What I want this house to always be. I read it twice. Maybe 3 times. Some of the things were simple. A safe place. A space for stories. A home for those who don't have one. I sat back in my chair and let the words sink in. It wasn't a to-do list. It was a prayer. A blueprint for something more than just walls and roof. That's when the idea took hold. The next morning, I went to the community center. It had been years since I'd stepped foot in there, not since Marjorie used to volunteer for meal prep. I asked if they knew anyone looking for temporary housing, students, veterans, maybe someone rebuilding after hard times. The woman at the desk, Maria, gave me a strange look. "Are you offering space?" I nodded. "I've got a big house. Too many empty rooms." Within an hour, she had a list. "Most of these folks are just looking for stability," she said. "A room, a quiet place to sleep, some trust. That's harder to find than rent these days." I didn't make a decision right away. I came home, walked through each room slowly, thought about what Marjorie would say. I could almost hear her voice. What good is space if it just stays empty? That afternoon, I called Mr. Keller and asked if there was a legal way to offer space without becoming a landlord. He chuckled. "Frank, are you trying to open a boarding house?" "Something like that," I said. "But not for profit. For purpose." He helped me draft a basic agreement, just enough to keep everything above board, nothing binding in a cold way. I wasn't looking for tenants. I was looking for people who needed what I had to offer. Within a week, I met the first young man. His name was Malik. 19. Studying to become an electrician. His parents had passed when he was a teen, and he'd bounced from couch to couch ever since. Maria brought him by. He walked through the house like it was a museum, cautious, curious. "You sure about this, sir?" he asked. I nodded. "You need a room." "I've got one." That's the whole story. He smiled then, big and genuine. "I can help with stuff. I'm good with repairs." "You know how to fix a gate latch?" I asked. "Easiest thing in the world." We shook hands that day, a simple agreement made without lawyers or pressure. The room that once held Adam's belongings became Malik's. I cleared the closet, dusted the window ledge, even placed one of Marjorie's old crocheted blankets on the bed. The house changed almost instantly. There was life in it again. Not noise, Malik was quiet, respectful, always offering to help. But energy. Warmth. He made breakfast one morning and asked if I wanted eggs. I hadn't heard that question in years. Within a month, 2 more people moved in. One was Carla, a nursing student who'd been sleeping in her car. The other was Jonah, a former Marine rebuilding his life after a divorce. They each took a room. Paid what they could, small contributions that mostly covered utilities and groceries. But what they gave back was so much more than money. They brought conversation. Laughter. Shared meals. The house buzzed, gently, like it used to. One evening, I walked into the living room to find Carla helping Malik with his resume while Jonah repaired a loose floorboard near the fireplace. It looked like family. Not the kind I'd lost. The kind I'd chosen. The word got around. Neighbors began stopping by, not to gossip this time, to help. Mrs. Delgado dropped off pies again. Mr. Hernandez lent tools. Even the local high school offered to send students who needed community service hours to help paint and clean. I opened up the spare den as a study room. Added shelves. Dug out Marjorie's old cookbook and let Carla use it in the kitchen. She laughed when she read the notes Marjorie scribbled in the margins. She wrote like a poet, she said. She lived like one, I replied. There were hard days, of course. The house wasn't magic. But for every hard day, there were 3 good ones: shared dinners, board games, projects in the yard. And slowly, I healed. Not just from the betrayal. From the silence that came after. One night, Malik knocked on my door. I fixed the gutter, Mr. Frank. You didn't have to. He shrugged. You gave me more than a roof. Least I can do is keep it standing. After he left, I looked around the room. My room. The same one I'd nearly been pushed out of. And I realized, for the first time in a long time, it wasn't just me holding this house up anymore. It was all of us. Together. The house had never been louder, or warmer. It wasn't chaotic, just alive. Doors opened and closed throughout the day. Laughter bounced down the hallway. The smell of fresh bread or curry or someone's late-night noodles lingered in the air. Every corner of the place, every old nail and creaky board, held new life. But what struck me most wasn't the noise. It was the respect. Carla always asked before using the kitchen. Jonah made sure to leave the porch chair out for me every morning. Malik, who had once walked through the door looking like he'd been holding his breath for years, now grinned as he showed me his first paycheck from a job he'd picked up with an electrical company. I hung it on the fridge like a proud grandfather. They weren't blood. But they treated me with more kindness than my own son had in years. We ate dinner together every Friday, something Carla suggested, calling it Found Family Night. She even made place cards. I smiled when I saw mine, Frank, founder and gardener-in-chief. They made jokes about who snored the loudest, who forgot to label leftovers, and who burned the toast again. They teased me about my slippers, my black and white movies, and my old record player, but always gently, always with love. And I loved them for it. One Sunday, I caught Malik kneeling beside the rose bush in the yard. He was pruning it the same way I once taught Eli. Looks good, I said. He looked up, grinning. Trying to keep the old girl blooming. I chuckled. She's stubborn. Like her planter. He patted the soil and said, then she'll last forever. There were days when I sat alone and thought about Adam. About Kim. About how things could have been if they'd just seen me, really seen me. But I never let those thoughts fester. I had made peace with my decision, and the house reminded me why every single day. And then one afternoon, it happened. The doorbell rang. I opened it and found Eli standing there. No car behind him. Just him. Backpack slung over one shoulder. Hoodie, jeans, and eyes that looked older than they should have. Hi, Grandpa. I stared for a moment, unsure what to say. I took the bus, he added, rubbing the back of his neck. I wanted to see if you were okay. I stepped aside. Come in. He looked around the house, visibly confused. The changes were subtle, but the energy was different. The living room had new bookshelves. The kitchen had a schedule on the wall for shared chores. The house felt lived in, not just occupied. Who are all these people? He asked. Friends, I said. Real family. He didn't say anything right away. Just walked to the old piano in the hallway, the one Marjorie used to play, and touched a worn key. I didn't want to go, he said suddenly. I sat on the bench beside him. I know. Mom said you didn't want us there. That you kicked us out. I looked at him. I asked for peace, Eli. I asked to stay in my home without being erased. That's not the same thing. He nodded slowly. I figured. We sat in silence for a long while. Then he pulled something from his backpack, the letter he'd left me weeks ago. I meant it, he said. I just didn't know what to do. You don't have to do anything, I replied. You're here. That's a start. He looked toward the hallway. Is it okay if I meet them? I smiled. Of course. They'll be glad to meet you. That evening, Eli joined us for dinner. Malik taught him how to play a domino game he didn't know. Carla asked about his favorite music. Jonah cracked a joke about teenagers who still couldn't drive. Eli laughed, genuinely, for the first time in a long time. He didn't stay the night. But when he left, he hugged me. No words, just arms around my shoulders like they used to be when he was small. And in that moment, something mended. Not the whole wound, not the years of distance or the pain of betrayal. But something. The next morning, I found a note on the kitchen table, written in his messy handwriting. I'm glad you're happy, Grandpa. I'm glad you didn't give up. I'll come back soon, if that's okay. I folded the note and placed it in Marjorie's recipe box, tucked right behind her cornbread card. That afternoon, I stood on the porch while Malik fixed a loose shingle, Carla read in the sun, and Jonah watered the garden. I felt something settle in me, not pride, not triumph, but peace. Real family isn't always who shares your blood. Sometimes it's who shows up when everyone else walks away. It's who helps with the dishes without being asked. Who asks how your day was and means it. Who shares laughter over a burnt casserole and makes you feel seen. And I had that now. Not because I demanded it. Because I reclaimed it. It was early evening when I heard the knock. Not the doorbell. A knock. Quiet, deliberate, familiar in rhythm. I knew before I opened it. Adam. He stood on the porch with his hands in his jacket pockets, eyes tired, hair grayer than I remembered. No suitcase. No false smile. Just a man who looked like he hadn't slept well in months. Can I come in? He asked. I paused for a moment, then nodded. Just you? He looked down, nodded. Yeah. Just me. I stepped aside and let him in. The house was calm, Carla was at class, Malik was working late, Jonah had gone to visit his sister. It was just the two of us. As it had once been. He looked around. It's different. It's better, I replied. He gave a small nod. I can see that. I didn't offer coffee. Didn't offer excuses. We sat in the living room, where the air was thick but not hostile. Just heavy with everything that had gone unsaid. After a few minutes, Adam broke the silence. I didn't come to fight, he said. I just needed to see it. For myself. You mean the house? I asked. No, he said. You. This. What you turned it into. I waited. He ran a hand through his hair. Eli talks about you a lot. Said the house feels warmer now. Said he felt safe here. He is, I said quietly. Adam nodded again, slower this time. I think I was angry at the wrong things. For a long time. Angry that you didn't need me the way I thought you would. Angry that you were still standing, even after Mom died. His voice cracked, just a little. I think I wanted to feel needed. And when I didn't, I tried to take control instead. I looked at him. Older now, more worn down. Not a villain. Not a monster. Just a man who'd let fear and ego poison his choices. You didn't need to take control, I said. You just needed to show up. He swallowed hard. I know. I know that now. We sat in silence again, listening to the house settle. Somewhere down the hall, the floor creaked as the evening air cooled. I've made a mess, he whispered. With you. With Eli. With myself. You can start cleaning it up, I said. But not here. Not by expecting anything back. He looked up. I'm not here for the house, Dad. I'm not even here for forgiveness. I raised an eyebrow. Then what are you here for? He hesitated. Then said, closure, maybe. Or just to say it, I'm sorry. The words weren't dramatic. They weren't teary or rehearsed. Just honest. I believed I was doing what was best, he said. But I didn't stop to ask what you needed. I just assumed. And when you pushed back, I saw it as defiance instead of dignity. I let that hang in the air. You were wrong, I said. But I appreciate the apology. He nodded slowly. I know I don't have a place here anymore. I just needed you to know that I finally see it, everything you did. The sacrifices. The love. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small box. I didn't take it at first. It's not much, he said. Just something I found while packing. Thought it should stay here. I opened it. Inside was a photo, me, Marjorie, and a 6-year-old Adam standing in front of the newly built house. My arms were around them both. The paint on the siding still fresh. I stared at it a long while. You can keep it if you want, he said. I shook my head. No. Leave it here. Maybe it'll remind the others who started it all. He looked around once more. They're lucky, you know. The ones living here now. They respect it, I said. And they respect me. He stood then, slowly. No rush, no resentment. Goodbye, Dad, he said. I won't come back unless I'm asked. I walked him to the door. Just before he stepped out, I said, you were a good boy, once. He turned. His face was tight with emotion. I'm trying to find that part of me again. Start with Eli, I said. He's still watching you. He gave a slow, firm nod. I will. He walked away without looking back. I closed the door and stood there for a moment. The porch light flickered on. Somewhere in the house, the radiator hummed to life. The photo still sat in my hand. I placed it on the mantel, beside Marjorie's succulent, beneath the cross-stitch that read, "This house is built on love." Then I sat in the armchair and let the quiet settle back in. It wasn't peace between us, not fully. But it was truth. And truth, no matter how late it arrives, has a strange way of bringing light with it. The day we hung the new sign out front, I stood back and stared at it for a long time. Not because it was big or flashy, just simple wood, hand-painted by Carla and Jonah, but because of what it said. Marjorie's place. A home of second chances. I couldn't speak for a moment. Just looked at the way her name curled in soft white lettering, right above the porch steps we'd painted together decades ago. The same porch where we drank coffee every morning. Where she'd hum church hymns while knitting. Where we waved to neighbors and watched the world change. Now, the world was walking back through that gate. The ceremony wasn't fancy. Just the people who lived there, a few neighbors, a couple of folks from the community center. Malik grilled hot dogs in the backyard. Carla baked lemon bars that reminded me of Marjorie's. Jonah played an old guitar someone had left behind. And me? I stood by the fence and watched it all like a farmer surveying his harvest. It wasn't pride I felt. It was fulfillment. Inside, the rooms had been painted in soft colors, each one named after something Marjorie loved. The lilac room. The willow room. The dusk blue den. Her photos were everywhere now, not tucked away in dusty boxes. Not memorialized in sadness. Alive. Present. Integrated into the house she helped build. We had a quiet corner where guests could leave messages, things they were thankful for, goals they'd set, small victories. The board was nearly full now. One note from Malik read, "First week with no nightmares." Another from Carla, "Got into nursing school. Still can't believe it." Jonas simply said, "This place gave me back my mornings." Every week, someone new walked through our door. Someone just looking for a warm bed, a safe place, a little dignity. And every week, we welcomed them. No judgment. No red tape. Just the kind of care Marjorie always gave so freely. I found myself waking up earlier. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to. The kettle still whistled like it always had. The sunlight still came through the east window. But now, there were footsteps in the hallway. Quiet knocks on the door. The sound of life, not intrusion. One morning, I stepped outside and found a group of neighborhood kids picking weeds along the sidewalk. Community hours, their teacher said. But they chose your house specifically. I smiled, gave them lemonade, and told them Marjorie would have insisted on extra cookies. Later that week, a reporter from the local paper stopped by. She asked if she could write a piece about the house, the residents, the transformation. "What made you do it?" she asked, notepad in hand. I thought about that for a while before I answered. Because sometimes the people who were supposed to love you the most forget how. And sometimes, the people who were never meant to stay become the ones who keep you standing. She nodded, wrote that down, and then asked, "Do you miss them? Your son? Your grandson?" I didn't lie. Every day. But I don't miss the man he became. I miss the boy who used to hold my hand while crossing the street. The one who said he wanted to build a house just like his daddy. She looked at me carefully. "And if he came back?" "He already did once," I said. And I told him the truth. I forgave, but I didn't forget. She smiled. "That's rare." "No," I said. "That's learned." The article ran the next week. The photo showed me sitting on the porch, the new sign just behind me, a group of residents waving in the background. The headline read, "One man's house, a town's second home." Marjorie would have blushed at the attention. But she would have been proud. A few days after the article came out, I received a letter. Handwritten. No return address, but I recognized the writing. It was from Adam. "Dad." I read the article. I sat with it for a long time. I showed Eli. He said, "Grandpa really built something." He's right. You did. I'm sorry again. I know I don't have a place there anymore, and I'm not asking for one. I just wanted to say, I'm glad the house still remembers love, even if I forgot how to show it. Adam. I placed the letter in the same box where I kept Eli's. Didn't cry. Just sat in the quiet and let it be. That evening, we held another Friday dinner. Everyone brought something. The table was crowded, the food too much, the laughter loud. We went around sharing one thing we were grateful for. When it came to me, I raised my glass and said, "I'm grateful this house outlived my grief. And that Marjorie's name will outlive all of us." We toasted to that. Later, after the dishes were done and the porch was quiet again, I sat alone and looked out over the yard. The rose bush was blooming again. The porch light glowed like a beacon. And I whispered, "We did it, Marge." Because we had.